Bob Hanssen will always go down as one of the worst spies in American history.
There'd been other espionage cases, but this was much bigger, and nobody'd ever seen anything like it.
Hanssen changed forever the concept of trusted insider within the FBI.
It really struck me that this was a plan that he had had all along.
If he can, at least in fantasy, offer Bonnie to me and betray her, what else might he be able to betray?
This has been a story that's had everything. It had drama, it had espionage, it had sex. If you wrote a novel about this, people would say, oh, no, that can't possibly happen. We'll never know who Robert Hanssen really was. We'll never know.
Dear friends, I thank you for your assistance these many years. It seems, however, that my greatest utility to you has come to an end. Since communicating last, and one wonders if because of it, I've been promoted to a higher do-nothing senior executive job outside of regular access to information. It is as if I'm being isolated. Furthermore, I believe I have detected repeating bursting radio signal emanations from my vehicle. I will leave this alone, for knowledge of their existence is sufficient. Amusing the games children play. Something has aroused the sleeping tiger.
It sounds like something out of a Cold War-era novel, a veteran FBI agent accused of being a spy for the Russians.
I will never forget the moment that I found out that Bob Hanssen was a spy.
The alleged spy, his name is Robert Philip Hanssen, a 27-year veteran of the FBI, is to appear in court this morning.
My reaction was, Hanssen? I mean, it was just a total shock.
There are a lot of complex reasons as to why he did it.
The more we learned about him, the more amazing the story became. I mean, here was a guy who had portrayed himself as a good father, a good husband, a good Catholic, anti-communist, patriotic. And here he was, selling secrets to the Russians.
If convicted of these charges, he would be counted as only the third spy in the history of the FBI.
I knew the damage would be bad because he had access to a lot of information because of the job he was doing inside the Bureau's counterintelligence program.
The full extent of the damage done is yet unknown. We believe, however, that it was exceptionally grave.
Live bodies being given up by him in terms of defectors in place that were resettled in this country, weapons systems, satellite communications from all across the intelligence community. This was beyond the pale.
The first thing that really struck me was how premeditated it all appeared to be.
And I thought to myself, you diabolical bastard, because you did exactly what you said, and that is you outthought them. You outthought us.
I met with Robert Hanssen over an entire year at the Alexandria Detention Center. I'm Dr. David Charney. I'm a psychiatrist. I've been practicing for over 40 years. He immediately on his own took the initiative to start talking about his childhood, and specifically and almost exclusively about his father. His father was a formidable presence in his mind.
I'm Ann Blackman. I've been a news reporter for half the time for the Associated Press and half the time for Time magazine. Robert Hanssen was born in 1944 on the west side of Chicago. His parents were Howard and Vivian Hanssen. Howard Hanssen worked for the Chicago Police Department for 30 years. In the early 1960s, he was promoted to lieutenant, and he was working for the Red Squad. And he was put in charge of a room filled with intelligence dossiers on mobsters, high-end criminals, all kinds of the bad guys in Chicago. He had power.
And I think in Bob's mind, it was always something that fascinated him. He was very proud of his father, but I never knew anything about how his father mistreated him.
Howard Hanssen was a manipulative man. People in the neighborhood said that he wasn't an alcoholic, but that he was more like a dry drunk.
My mom never recalled him ever saying anything positive about Bob. All these comments that he made were painful, wounding, and if Howard would say things like that to my mom in kind of a public place, it might have been kind of tough on Bob at home.
You have an undiluted, unadulterated experience of being put down and being regarded as worthless and inferior. And you carry that with you.
Robert Hanssen was an awkward kid. He never really fit in. Bob Hanssen didn't have a lot of friends. He certainly didn't have many people at all that he trusted.
My name is Jack Hoschauer. I consider Bob Hanssen my best friend. What holds any friendship together? We were a couple of geeky guys who hung out. We're not part of the cool crowd. We were certainly the out group.
Jack Hoschauer and Bob Hanssen met when they were freshmen at the William Taft High School in Chicago, and they trusted each other.
As our relationship developed over the years, I saw different aspects of Bob's personality. There was still the geeky science side. There was also the side that most teenage boys have. We're interested in pretty girls.
Bob met Bonnie Hawk during the summer in 1965 when they were both college students. She was a pretty young girl.
Many people said Bonnie looked like Natalie Wood, which certainly was the motivation for Bob. He wanted a pretty girl on his arm, absolutely.
And she was perky and fun, and she made people look at Bob twice. How could he catch this pretty young girl? She really gave him some validation. When Bob got back to Knox College in his senior year, he began writing letters to Bonnie. And he wrote these wonderful lyrical letters that were much more effusive than his personality. And Bonnie loved getting these letters. It validated to her that he was everything that she wanted and that she needed. So they decided to get married.
His father told Bonnie, "Why do you want to marry my son? He's a loser." Can you imagine what you would feel like if your dad says that to your future wife? And his dad did. So I think that affected him.
He did not want his wife, Bonnie, to see him as a failure. It was clear to me that he respected her and that he wanted to be aligned with her. And one of the things that she was instrumental in doing was making him join Opus Dei.
Opus Dei is a tiny, secret Catholic society that requires members to go to daily Mass and regular confession. Many of the members wear a cilice, a metal chain around their thigh that digs into them and reminds them of the sins they have committed.
I'd never heard of Opus Dei until Bob told me he was formally converting to Catholicism. And that was a surprise to me. Someplace in him, he was searching for some hard and fast rules.
After Bob graduated from Northwestern Business School, he got a good job within a Chicago accounting firm, but he hated it. It was boring. He didn't have the power that his father had had as a cop in Chicago. He didn't have access to the secret documents that his father had. Bob wanted more. In 1972, Bob joined the Chicago police force. This was an interesting time in Chicago. Mayor Richard Daley had any number of investigations going on about the corruption in the city. And so Bob was chosen to be part of this squad they called C5. And it was right up his alley. In this way, he could spy on his fellow cops. In fact, it was probably his first venture into being a double agent.
It certainly was something that he had contemplated probably from the beginning of his career. That was the life that he was seeking to lead himself.
In 1976, Bob joined the FBI.
He may have sought admission to impress his dad. Bob was always, till the day he died, trying to please his father.
His father continually denigrated him. Even after he was in the FBI, he said, well, you're just a cop. You're no better than I am, you're just a cop.
But Bob was going to be a better cop, a more powerful cop than his father was. This was the beginning of Bob's climb to really outdo his dad.
The first day that you join the FBI, you take an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. It's a memorable day in your FBI career when you stand there and raise your right hand. I'm Neil Gallagher. I spent 29 years in the FBI, and I was named Assistant Director of the National Security Division for Foreign Counterintelligence. Once you got brought into the FBI, you were in the inner circle, you were trusted. You were given the crown jewels. Hanssen's early assignment was in a small resident agency in a small Midwestern city. It was a very typical beginning for an FBI agent. He worked criminal investigative matters, and he was reassigned to the New York office because they were looking for people with financial expertise.
They assigned him to a white-collar crime squad looking at major frauds and embezzlements. He identified an accountant on a GRU squad that he and that agent switched positions. That enabled him to be in counterintelligence after 3 months being in New York.
It sounds prestigious. It was not. It was the pits. I'm Elaine Shannon. I'm an investigative reporter covering criminal justice and national security agencies. The way you earn honor, glory, and promotions in the FBI was and is to make cases, make arrests.
This is what they joined the FBI for. You have to understand that foreign counterintelligence isn't a kick down the door field anyway.
We're not going to get into gunfights and stuff. It's a different kind of life. It's more cerebral.
Now, Hanssen came in at the dawn of the computer age at the FBI. Agents didn't have their own computers, they weren't comfortable around them, and the FBI management was struggling to get into the digital world.
I always used to say, Bob understood what DOS was before I could spell it. He understood computers before anybody else did. Roll 'em. I'm David Major. I spent 24 years as a supervisory special agent in the FBI, and I spent almost all of that time doing counterintelligence. He was the one that set up our computer systems in New York for the very first time about keeping track of the Russians we had. And Bob Hanssen was recognized for that.
As it progressed, we added more and more to that system, but he was the one setting it up and seeing it all.
Hanssen was moving up in his career. But if you got transferred to New York, yeah, it was a big time, but then how do you live? Most agents, particularly those who had families, could not afford to live there or near there.
Bob's father enters the picture and he gives the money, but it always comes with the admonition that, you know, I'm bailing you out. He was always afraid, I believe, that he would be seen by Bonnie as a failure of a husband.
And how do you define failure? Well, he would define failure possibly, but how much money you're making.
And I think that is a huge motivator for someone like Bob Hanssen.
He was intrigued by intelligence work, and I think he thought, I can play this both ways, and no one will ever know that I was a spy. I think that was his game plan.
There is serendipity here, and things just lined up. The big problem was that he was willing to take the shot when he had the shot.
I'll never forget the day. They said to me, we know who the mole is. They told me it was Robert Hanssen, Bob Hanssen, and I just was taken aback. You'd look at him and you'd say, boy, there's a straight arrow. There's a no-nonsense guy right there. In Bob, it was a dramatic contradiction of terms. He really was different from the image he wanted people to see. My name is Sheila Horan. I entered the FBI in 1973 and went to a counterintelligence squad. At the time I arrived in New York, the Soviet mission to the United Nations was about 3 blocks away from our office. It included AMTORG, which is the Soviet trade organization. AMTORG was where the GRU liked to place their intelligence officers. The GRU is the military intelligence arm of the Soviet government. And their collection is focused on what can they obtain from our military services, weapon systems, communication systems, satellite systems, and so forth. In Midtown Manhattan, AMTORG was where their intelligence officers could collect very nicely from that platform.
It was a front, but Hanssen knew what it was, because the minute he got into this counterintelligence division, he got information about people who were working for the United States within the Soviet system. He betrayed them.
Dmitry Polyakov was codenamed Top Hat, a very influential and important GRU officer who provided the United States government with tremendous information over a period of 20-plus years. Bob Hanssen gave Polyakov's name in 1979. So in his very first dump, as they say, to the GRU, he gave away fantastically important information. He also exhibited a knowledge of tradecraft, how they would contact each other, how to use one-time pads, which is a coding system, which is very, very secure. So these kinds of things show that he was thinking about this for quite some time.
In the spring of '81, Bonnie went down into their basement.
She had caught Bob putting either a note in a Coke can or taking a note out of a Coke can?
Well, because of an indiscretion on his part years before, where Bob had an incident with a former girlfriend of his, she insisted that he tell her what he was doing.
They wouldn't use the word spy, but he admitted to giving the Russians meaningless intelligence to scam them out of some money.
He called it just trash for cash.
I've heard figures $30,000. It was a lot of money, especially for an FBI agent assigned in New York.
Well, Bonnie was very, in many ways, naive and very much inclined to believe her husband.
So she and Bob went and had a counseling session with the priest, the end of which the priest said, "Bob, please take a vow that you'll stop having this activity, and any money you gain from this, you'll give it to charity." Bob said yes. He agreed.
Why did Hanssen stop spying for a while? There are a lot of theories. I can tell you what I know. Bonnie didn't blow the whistle to the FBI. She got him to go see a priest. That seems to be her way of fixing things. The one thing I think we can be pretty confident of is that he didn't want to be exposed.
My name's Jim Olson. I was an FBI agent from 1972 till 2000. I met Bob in January 1981 at FBI headquarters when he was assigned to the budget unit within the FBI's counterintelligence programs division. The budget unit gave him access to documents that represented not just the FBI, but the entire U.S. intelligence community. And those documents described what those offices have done in the past and what they intend to do in the future.
So he had access to programs that most of us never knew. Then where does he go from there to the Soviet analytical unit?
I first met Bob. He was in the budget unit, which was right across the hall from the Soviet analytic unit. My name's Bob King. I served as intelligence research specialist with the FBI for my entire career there. My job as an analyst was basically to look at old cases to see if there were any leads in terms of Soviet or KGB or GRU activities in the United States. At headquarters, we were flooded with spies. Bob Hanssen was not ignorant of this and wanted to be in the know.
In the counterintelligence world, a good agent is somebody who's supposed to get information from some unknown source. It's to recruit adversarial intelligence agents.
Courtship was the code name for a breakthrough in FBI-CIA liaison and cooperation. They were extraordinarily successful. In the mid-'80s, Courtship had recruited not one but two Soviet KGB intelligence officers, Sergei Motorin and Valery Martinov.
Bob heard they were working on good stuff, and it fascinated him. He wanted to be in that mix, and he got himself transferred. I'm not sure how.
Bob was a part of the analytical support to operations, and he had working with him some of the best analysts the FBI had. But Bob was never considered a key player among the Soviet operational people.
However, in the analytical unit to which he was assigned, Hanssen could look at everything and not be questioned about it because he had to do it for his job.
Bob Hanssen knew about the recruitment of these two sources. Talk about a perfect location for a potential spy.
At FBI headquarters, he was in his element. But in 1985, Bob voluntarily sought an assignment in New York. It was not an operational squad. It was a squad where they were processing the results of surveillance. Huge amounts of information.
He was successful in getting this job. because it played to his strengths: computer, mathematics, and he got a promotion.
And so they moved to New York. Bonnie didn't want to go. Bonnie and Bob had 5 children, and she was pregnant with a 6th. But they desperately needed the money.
They didn't have enough money to pay the girls' doctor bills. It put Bob under an intense psychological and emotional pressure. My job is to take care of my wife and kids. I'm not able to do it.
Things were at a dangerous sort of equilibrium there, but Bob Hanssen was a man of faith. One of my fears for Bob Hanssen is that he actually interpreted this as God provided him with this opportunity to make some money.
In 1985, Victor Dekjar, who was a KGB officer in Washington, received a letter at his home in suburban Virginia. And inside was another sealed envelope saying, "Please deliver to Victor Cherkashin." My name is Gregory Pfeiffer. I'm a journalist. I've written several books about Russia, including Spy Handler, which I co-wrote with Victor Cherkashin, head of counterintelligence in the Washington embassy.
Very experienced and well-respected within the KGB. He was the chief of Line KR, in charge of recruiting American assets.
So when Victor Cherkashin opened the letter, he was quite impressed with what he saw.
Dear Mr. Cherkashin, soon I will send a box of documents to Mr. Dekjar. They are from certain of the most sensitive and highly compartmented projects of the U.S. intelligence community. Your service has recently suffered some setbacks. I warn that Mr. Boris Yuzin, Mr. Sergei Motorin, and Mr. Valery Martinov have been recruited by our special services.
The letter revealed the identities of 3 American spies in the KGB and also some technical operations. So even though the letter was treated with a high degree of understandable professional skepticism, it was very intriguing.
And then in the early 80s, Motorin and Martinov returned to the Soviet Union. That came, of course, to the attention of the agency. These men were run by the FBI and the CIA for a goodly amount of time, and they were very, very concerned about that because it was an unusual move to have them both come back. We now know that Bob Hanssen revealed to the Russians that they were cooperating with the United States intelligence services.
After the tribunal declares them to be a convicted spy and then sentences them, then they march them back down to the cell. As they're walking down a hall, the executioner would step out of the shadows of the darkness and put a bullet to their head.
In 1985, Bob sought an assignment to New York and was hitting all the right steps to have a successful FBI career. We know now in hindsight that he established contact with the KGB in that same year.
There are so many motives for Bob, but he was maybe a little disappointed in his job. He didn't have the excitement that he thought he was going to get from joining the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He was getting a rush from this. He was challenging himself to do something that he thought he could do without being caught. He knew that he had to protect himself for the length of his service with the Russians. So he did not tell the Russians who he was.
In the letters to the KGB, Robert Hanssen identified himself as Ramon Garcia, this fake name he'd built up.
Ramon Garcia gave instructions for so-called dead drops, places where money and information could be exchanged.
Drop location. Please leave your package for me under the corner nearest the street of the wooden footbridge located just west of the entrance to Nottoway Park. Signals. Your signal to me, one horizontal mark of white adhesive tape, meaning drop filled. My signal to you, one vertical mark of white adhesive tape, meaning I have received your package.
Bob was clever to do things with the Russians that impeded or hurt their ability to find out who he was. All of his contacts in terms of dead drops were in the Washington area, not in New York at all. He wanted the Russians to think that he was someone in Washington, D.C.
Ultimately, Ramon Garcia showed that he was indeed privy to some of the most highly sensitive information in the U.S. intelligence community. And so Cherkashin wanted to provide the biggest sense of security for him so that Ramon Garcia felt as safe as possible to give more information. On March 3rd, 1986, the second dead drop that Ramon Garcia was supposed to unload didn't take place, and Ramon Garcia disappeared for some time. Cherkashin started to worry about, well, maybe he'd lost the agent, and then Cherkashin gets a letter.
I apologize for the delay since our break in communications. I wanted to determine if there was any cause for concern over security.
He decided to lie low for a while to figure out whether or not he had been compromised.
If you wish to continue our discussions, please have someone run an advertisement in the Washington Times. For sale, Dodge Diplomat, 1971, needs engine work, $1,000.
He provided instructions saying that he would give the KGB a number in New York, that he would call the number at the appointed time.
I will say, hello, my name is Ramon. I'm calling about the car you offered for sale in the Times.
Cherkashin took this conversation very seriously. He was suspicious of Ramon Garcia, and this was the best opportunity to try to figure out who Ramon Garcia was. And of course, this conversation would be recorded and poured over.
I suggest that our meeting will take place without delay. February 13th, 1 p.m., okay? 1-3. Yeah, 13th. 1 p.m.
Let me see if I can do that. Hold on. That should be fine.
Okay. We will confirm you that the papers are waiting for you with the same horizontal tape in the same place as we did it at the first time. If everything is okay?
I believe it should be fine, and thank you very much.
Not at all. Not at all. Nice job for both of us. Have a nice evening, sir. Bye-bye.
In the FBI, there's this mythology that secrets are very closely held, but many times they are not.
We did not know what happened to Motorin and what happened to Martynov. It was mysterious to us. They just went off the screen. So we started Anlace, which was specifically geared to find how Martynov and Motorin were compromised. It was an extremely sensitive investigation with very limited access to the people who were assigned to this. The modus operandi for those involved in a mole hunt is not for the faint of heart. It is very, very time-intensive. It is an extremely complex investigation.
And it becomes a kind of puzzle game where if you know this is true, then what would fit with it? And every once in a while you get what they call a corner piece. That is a known thing, a fact. My name is Paul Moore. I was the FBI's chief China analyst for a bit more than 20 years. We get a data point, and we can start to pull on that string and find anything else that will help us to focus in. Eventually, in a perfect world, we catch a bona fide spy.
When I look back at Bob's transfer in 1987 back to FBI headquarters, many people look at that as a lateral transfer, not a promotion. Was Bob engineering his own opportunity? Because by going back to FBI headquarters, he had access to much greater breadth of information than he would on one particular squad in New York.
The primary responsibility that he was going to be involved in and was going to be the program manager for was a mole study, a mole hunt.
It's at that point that he has a treasure trove of information available to him. He didn't have to go look for them. They were put on his lap.
He made upwards of 10 to 15 drops with the Russians, and this was a very, very, very active time. At the same time, the Bureau was not able to successfully exploit the mole study. We were not able to come up with the answer.
They couldn't do it by analyzing who had access and then eliminating the innocent parties.
What we do know, however, is there was a mole, and potentially the mole was still out there. It was tailor-made for Bob Hanssen. And what I mean by that is, if he could see that there was nobody looking for him, not him, Bob Hanssen, but him, a mole, he felt safe and felt that he could continue with his activities.
I've never met anybody more compartmentalized than Robert Hanssen. There were so many parts of him that were antithetical to the other parts. All these things were opposites inhabiting the same mind.
We all have secret lives, and we would all be mortified if the world found out what we fantasized about. So no big deal there, we all do it. But I certainly didn't expect any of that from Bob.
People that didn't know Bob well, I think, viewed him as having a condescending attitude.
Bob perceived himself as an egghead and could be very off-putting at times.
His fellow agents found him to be supercilious, holier than thou, and he portrayed himself as being the smartest guy in the room.
This did not translate into a guy that was politicking around the office. You have to have charm to say all that. But he certainly wanted recognition, and he wanted to be revered.
How, Priscilla, did you meet Robert Hanssen?
Well, I met him at the club where I used to work in D.C.
You were a stripper at the Joanna's 1819, right?
Club.
That's a club near the FBI, right?
Priscilla Sue Gailey was a stripper in a strip club just south of DuPont Circle, a seedy spot on a seedy street. And Hanssen would go there on hot summer afternoons when there weren't many customers.
He came in, watched you perform, and began a conversation?
He was on business. He was there to meet a contact of his, I guess, for some information, he had said.
All I knew about her was she was a pretty gal, was the stripper of the year. That's all I knew about her.
Did he tell you he was an FBI agent?
Yeah, he told me that, but they could be telling you anything at that point.
And she was apparently the gal that he decided he was going to rescue for whatever reason.
When did a relationship or a friendship begin?
I think almost immediately, because he gave me a wonderful compliment, the most beautiful compliment I've ever had in my life.
What was it?
Just something to the effect of he'd never expected to see anyone with such grace and beauty in a strip club. And I did catch him going out the door of the club to thank him, not for the money, but for the compliment, because it was really, really beautiful.
Priscilla was his outlet for being the big guy around town. He took her to lunch. He took her to museums. He gave her money to have her teeth fixed. He even bought her a Mercedes-Benz one time. Not only did he buy her a car, but he gave her an American Express credit card to put the charges on to keep it in good shape.
I think he was playing an ego game that went along with his fantasy persona as international spy man of mystery. Went along with his desire to have a beautiful woman next to him.
He may be pious, he may be sanctimonious, he may be hyper-religious, but he also likes to go to strip clubs.
I would ask him, I said, how do you reconcile this with your moral, ethical beliefs? And he'd just say, I'm weak. And being a weak person myself, I kind of said, well, I understand about that.
I think Bob looked at his life and said one of the great successes of his life was being married to Bonnie. He married up, and he married a woman who was very attractive, very vivacious, outgoing. So he loves his woman, but she's his trophy.
He wanted Bonnie to be his glamorous consort, but her interests were different. Bonnie wanted to be his wife and a mother to his kids. Now, those aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, but they're certainly trend in different directions.
He wanted to give her diamonds and minks, but she'd ask, where did the money come from? Bonnie's idea of a great present was a vacuum cleaner. He never gave a vacuum cleaner to his stripper. No one in Bob's professional circle, social circle, had a clue about his sexual proclivities. It came as a shock to everyone except Jack Hoschauer.
Jack and Bob shared things that he would share with no one else. And I think it even overshadowed his relationship with Bonnie.
When Bob and Bonnie were first married, Jack Hoschauer was sent to Vietnam. And Bob felt badly about this. And so to cheer up his buddy, Bob sent Jack pictures of Bonnie in bed, naked, sexy stuff.
The photos came to me in the mail, 5x7 envelope, brown envelope. And I opened it, and here are these, 8 or 9 pictures of Bonnie progressively less clothed. And the next day or the day after that, I got a letter. He said, hope you enjoyed the little morale builder I sent you. So that was the initiation.
Bonnie had no idea that Bob was sending these pictures to Jack. You can only imagine how Bonnie would have felt about that.
Until the photos arrived when I was in Vietnam, I was an absolute gentleman in relation to Bonnie. And it upsets me that I was not an absolute gentleman after that.
At one point, Bob suggested to Jack that he might like to watch Bob and Bonnie having sex. So Bob left the curtain open in the bedroom so Jack could stand out there and look in. I guess Jack liked this. Bob liked this.
Hoschauer told me he did that for a while, but then it got cold, and so they set up this closed-circuit TV thing. Hoschauer could sit down there in the study and watch Bonnie and Bob, and of course, Bob would arrange Bonnie's body so that Hoschauer could get a good angle on it.
Bob wanted me to see, in a physical, erotic/sexual sense, what a beautiful woman Bonnie is. And I'd have to say, yeah, I saw that. But I never did anything that he did not invite me to do. And on several occasions, I turned down his invitation. So that's not to say I'm a great guy and saying that I'm a human being, but that's a shameful part of my history, and I'm ashamed of it.
At some point in the 1990s, Bob started writing fantasies about his sex life on the internet.
Bonnie would bring a book and a beach bag, hat, and lie on her blanket with her bikini top untied.
And not only was he writing fantasies about his sex life, he was using his real name and his real internet address and real details about Bonnie, naked, fixing her hair in front of the mirror with no clothes on, modeling stockings and panties and things for him, putting this all out there.
She'd look at me askance at first, but the more I did it, the more sexually aroused she'd get.
Bob was writing in these fantasy stories about his wife, who was teaching religion. The religion teacher had this stuff out there. I mean, how he could do that to her, to his family, to his kids. I mean, it's extraordinary. And the FBI didn't find them. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing the FBI didn't see this.
Once I was in Chicago, my communications with Hanssen over the years were relatively few in numbers. Most of my communications with the family were with my sister Bonnie. My name is Mark Walk. After I graduated from law school, I applied to the FBI. I worked mainly counterintelligence matters in Chicago until my retirement at the beginning of 2007. In 1985, I volunteered to go to Monterey Defense Language Institute for a year to learn Polish. And my sister Bonnie called me on the phone, and she said, "Oh, that's great. Bob says we may retire in Poland." This is a headquarters FBI agent suggesting that he might retire in a Soviet bloc country that runs active espionage against the United States. It seemed utterly nutty to me, so I tucked that in the back of my mind. Didn't even think about it again until, 1990, 5 years later. There was a training course for 2 weeks that ran in Virginia, and so I took the whole family out there for that. And my wife visited with all my relatives, with Jean and Bon and my other sister Peg and the kids and so forth. And so everything went well, and we drove home back to Chicago. But it was immediately upon return that my wife told me there was this business about Bonnie in a state. The way my wife described it to me was that Bonnie came running up the street completely in a lather, saying that she had just discovered $5,000 in Bob's sock drawer. When I learned that Bonnie had discovered the money, that was a revelation to me. And the way my older sister Jean described it was that Bonnie came running up the street, like completely in a lather, saying that she had just discovered $5,000 in Bob's sock drawer. There was also a question that Bob had purchased some rather expensive jewelry for her recently. Jean also told my older brother, Greg. He called me and said, "What do you make of this?" We had the sense that they seemed to spend freely, and we also were aware that living in a relatively expensive area, sending your many kids to private schools, that this would be a drain on resources. Now, at the same time, I was aware that there had been these operational losses in our counterintelligence program. My supervisor at that time told me that there was a big mole hunt going on at headquarters. I had no need to know this. Nobody should have been told about this, and yet I was told, and I couldn't unknow or unhear what I had heard. And my brother suggested to me, could he be involved in espionage? It was the kind of thing that we could see him perhaps gravitating toward. We ended the conversation, and I said to my wife, what am I going to do about this? She said, do what you know is right. I made the determination that at the first opportunity, I would get in touch with Jim Lyle, who was a supervisor on the squad that handled the Russia program in Chicago at the time. So we went up to the interview room, closed the door, and I recounted to him the 3 reasons that I thought taken together were enough to begin an investigation. The combination of the mole hunt and the idea of retiring in Poland. The money angle just added to that. It was all synergistic. All these things were working together, and I reverted to that point over and over again. This probably lasted for close to a half an hour, and toward the end he said, "Do you understand what you're saying to me?" And I said yes, that I may be accusing Bob Hanssen of espionage against the United States. So we left the room and went back downstairs and parted our ways, and he said, "I'll take care of this." The question of why I would not have confronted Bonnie or Bob about any of this is simply that I was in no position to do so. In the FBI, you don't conduct private investigations. I was also sensitive to the notion that, after all, I was taking a big step in accusing a family member, but also another FBI agent of, in a sense, the ultimate betrayal. I can tell you in my case, I didn't feel brave. I felt more desperate. I felt that I was being pushed between 2 loyalties and I had to make a choice. And I dreaded the future. Dreading the future isn't, I don't think, a brave feeling. I'm not sure.
The banner of a reborn Russia rises above the Kremlin, replacing the flag of the Soviet Union, now dead and buried.
Bob's espionage activity came to a halt in 1991, in large part because the Soviet Union was going through a complete dismemberment.
It also marked the dissolution of the KGB as an organization.
Viktor Shukashin retired from the KGB 10 days after the attempted coup d'etat against Mikhail Gorbachev, which was essentially the end of the USSR. He knew that the times had changed, that Russia was becoming a different place, and he stepped back.
And to put it in current parlance, there were a lot of guns for hire out there. There were disaffected KGB agents saying sayonara to the intelligence world itself, but they were out to make some money because they had, over the years, lots of access. Bob knew that this was happening over there. Bob also knew that he was at risk because of some of these defectors and these people. They were popping up all over the world wanting to sell information to us.
He's not a dumb man. He says, I've got to go to ground and let the water settle before I can continue spying.
At the same time, Anlace, the mole hunt that resulted from the deaths of Martinov and Motorin, ended without any resolving. We were not able to come up with the answer. And then we, the intelligence community, became aware of a video showing that Dmitry Polyakov was in fact arrested for espionage. He was a GRU officer and for over 20 years gave the United States government tremendously important information about Russian weapon systems.
The loss of Dmitry Polyakov was unrivaled. He was betrayed by Hanssen, and then they went and killed him.
What happened? Why did it happen? The U.S. intelligence community said, we got to look at this material again and see if there's another possible explanation for the U.S. intelligence failures. We got to continue a mole hunt.
So in the 90s, the agency and the Bureau started working together in a much more concerted way.
There was a special agreement to share sources, methods, production, and any compromises among the two groups. Working out of the vault, looking at all historic allegations of penetration of the FBI and of the CIA.
Government agents were at Aldrich Ames' house yesterday searching for more evidence of espionage activities.
Aldrich Ames was the head of Soviet counterintelligence in the CIA.
The former high-ranking CIA official and his wife have been accused of spying for the Soviet Union and later Russia.
FBI officials and intelligence were trying to figure out how information was getting to the Soviets. Some of that was explained by Ames, but not all. Questions remain, questions about information that Ames didn't have, so they kept looking.
The presupposition was that there was another mole operating out there. They came up with probably over 200 candidates. Finally, the list was winnowed way down. The one that survived most closely was Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly was a longtime CIA employee.
Brian Kelly had worked on the Felix Bloch case. We now know that Felix Bloch was working for the Soviet Union. He had been targeted by the CIA and FBI. They never could make a case on him. One day somebody came to Bloch and said, "You're under suspicion, you should get out of town." And he did. He left the country. Bloch had been warned, so who warned him? And did Kelly, knowing what he knew, do that? It's not a crazy supposition.
He was so close to the information we had about who the mole was that we centered on him and began an intensive investigation on Brian Kelly.
But this is the problem when you start analyzing. You can come to the wrong conclusion. You can add 2 and 2 and get 22 very fast.
We clearly, at the end, did not have enough information to arrest or even think about prosecution or anything of that nature. Brian was put on administrative leave at the agency, and we were back to ground zero.
There is a theory that Hanssen stopped spying for a while when the Soviet Union dissolved because he was worried that Hanssen, might be discovered.
But at the same time, he's seeing that the career that he thought Robert Hanssen deserved was now starting to be. He eventually does get promoted up to GS-15, but then the incident with his female support employee really spoke to a flaw in Hanssen's character.
The incident involved a young woman who worked for Bob in his unit. And as I understand the circumstances of this, Kimberly Lichtenberg was called to Bob's office very shortly before she was to leave for the day for some meeting that, in her view, had nothing to do with her.
She just gets up and says, "I'm done with this, Mr. Hanssen, I'm leaving," and walks out. Well, how did he respond to that? He got up and he followed her. He reached out, grabbed her arm. She then turned and fell and yelled at him, said, "Stay away from me, Mr. Hanssen." And everybody hears that. And everybody's head goes out like this to look at him down the hallway. So she's on the ground, pointing up to him. He's over her. The next day she goes to the police department, she files an assault. That's not good. He reacted the wrong way, and he paid the price for that. That June, he had come to my office. He looked awful. He looked like he was a walking dead. He was just in terrible shape. And I asked him, I said, "What's the matter, Bob?" And he basically said, "The Kimberly thing is still hanging over me. They're never going to get promoted again. It's over for me." He was very depressed, very depressed.
Hanssen got censured for inappropriate derogatory activity on an employee. He received a demotion because the FBI perceived that he was an ineffective manager. But at the same time, he was also resourceful. He convinced the powers to be that he could represent the FBI at the Office of Foreign Missions at the State Department.
I'm Mike Rochford. I spent 30 years in the FBI, specializing mostly in the investigation of Russians, line KR, KGB, and espionage matters. I'm sitting at the Washington field office, and I get this call from Hanssen. And he says, "I got some information. We've come up with some people you need to look at." I go, "What do you think I do, Bob?" And he goes, "Well, you and your squad are looking for moles within the CIA and the FBI." I go, "Well, who told you that?" He said, "Well, it doesn't matter." He says, "We all know." I said, "Well, I don't know that I'm going to talk to you about this, Bob." And he says, well, can you have somebody come and talk to me? And I said, "I'll tell you what." I said, "I'll have somebody go over and talk to you." I said, "But I'd appreciate you never calling me up again." In retrospect, it was way beyond the scope of what he should be asking about, knowledgeable about. As a person assigned to OFM, he shouldn't have even been worrying about my problem, the penetration intelligence community. So it's like, this is weird.
There was a time when Bob Hanssen was uncatchable because everything was going on, he would see it or have access to it. Now he has access to none of that. It's got to be a scary time for Bob because he's working in OFM. He's not mainstream at all.
So Hanssen gets stuck in the State Department. He has a computer terminal. He's alone. Nobody's looking over his shoulder. It turns out to be a good job for a spy.
Automated case system is the automated system that the Bureau puts all of its casework on. Bob had access to that legitimately as a user. Bob was able to master that, ACS, because he had time on his hands at State, so he could find out more information than people thought you could find out. He knew, based on what he could peruse on the automated case file, that he wasn't being looked at himself, so gave him the confidence that he could do it again without being caught. Bob was not in contact with the KGB or their successors, the SVR. In 1999, he reestablished contact with SVR that he had lost. His re-emergence into the game, I don't think had as financial aspect as the earlier one did.
I have come about as close as I ever want to come to sacrificing myself to help you, and I get silence. I hate silence.
Some people get on adrenaline highs need to get that fix every now and then, so his adrenaline needed rejuicing or something.
One might propose that I am either insanely brave or quite insane.
This guy was writing these very flowery, almost poetic letters. They were almost romantic, but he's also very needy, and that comes through, and he wanted more.
I'd say pin your hopes on insanely loyal. Only I can lose.
I am not a psychiatrist, but he's having doubts about his ability to exist without this excitement of being a spy and a mole.
He had a James Bond syndrome, that he envisioned the smooth operative that would have an attractive female on his arm at his beck and call. Ramon Garcia was his alter ego. Ramon Garcia was everything that he could never be. The famous spy for the Russians, a spy inside the FBI.
I was Bob Hanssen's friend in the FBI for 20 years. I hypothesized that, okay, there were two Bob Hanssens that were in operation here. So he had a part of him that was spying for the KGB to help his family. And then he had a part of him that was probably pretty narcissistic, where he decided he was very good at it. But once you start committing espionage, your best practical chance of getting away with it is to die, because the FBI is incredibly determined to find the people who are committing espionage. And they're very good at it, scary good.
A new era at the FBI is about to begin.
New leadership came in to the FBI Intelligence Division, and that team said, we're never going to analyze our way out of this. To narrow down who might be the mole, it would take many lifetimes. So let's find somebody who knows. The FBI philosophy is we flood the zone. We ask everybody everything, and then sooner or later we'll run into somebody who had access to this information.
Mike Rochford reinitiated a program that had existed before. It was codenamed Buck Lure.
They said, well, let's make a list, placement and access, KGB officers, that if they give us 100% of the information that we want to know about their knowledge of recruitments inside the intelligence community, we'll pay them. Over the course of the years, I don't know, I pitched about 35 to 38 different Russians.
Rochford and his group identified an individual that fit this bill. He was involved in private business, which so many of the ex-KGB officers were, and was looking to enlarge his business internationally. So we arranged to have this individual come to the United States under the guise of pursuing a business deal with him.
It was the first chance to really talk to somebody of substance, you know. And he's coming from this failed business deal, which we had engineered that it would fail. But his ticket is non-refundable, and it's for 2 weeks. And this is the second day of the visit. I see him on the streets of New York, and I go, hey, how you doing? And he goes, who are you? And I go, I'm Mike Rochford. I'm an FBI agent. He says, so what do you want? I said, I'm here to make you the most successful Russian-American businessman in the history of our two countries, bar none.
Mark talked to him and eventually got this guy to admit, yes, he has a file on this code name, Ramon Garcia. When the Soviet Union was collapsing in '91, he saw this file and he went, well, this looks like my 401k. I'll put this away for safekeeping. And if anybody comes asking, I can maybe bargain for this. And he has lots of the intimate information that you hardly ever have, like the dead drops and the locations and the monies. So we see the case from the inside, from the KGB perspective.
Mike Rochford and his team identified the exact right man for our mole hunt, because this man brought the mother lode.
In November of 2000, that source provided his first package of information, which was transmitted to FBI headquarters and would be some of it translated, some of it examined. Included in that package was a smaller package with a note on it, not to open that until the source could explain the significance. As you can imagine, that raised our curiosity. We honored his request and didn't open it.
He also had another surprise for us, a telephone conversation that was taped between Ramon and one of their officers. We had anticipated that it would be Brian Kelly. By no means had Brian faded into the Bureau's rearview mirror on this. He was still on the front burners in terms of our belief that he potentially could be the mole.
Well, we got what they call the case officer's notebook. And this source wrote in very carefully on the days where there were drops, and he received and he provided. And we knew it wasn't Brian because he was in Australia at the time these drops were made. And then if not Brian, then who?
So the ensuing weeks, our analyst in the analytical unit was sifting through the documentation from the Russians. He came upon some very interesting phrases, and he sat back in his chair and said, "I've heard these before."
Bob Hanssen had a lot of little sayings that he spouted. And some of those sayings turned up in these letters.
Particularly one phrase, sort of an off-color phrase that General Patton used at the time in World War II in speaking to the troops.
As General Patton said, let's get this over with so we can go kick the shit out of the purple-pissing Japanese.
And I said, no way. Just couldn't be Hanssen. So we got back to FBI headquarters. We went into this vault and pulled out the tape and listened to it again.
Sync is okay. I believe it should be fine, and thank you very much.
A certainty. This is Bob Hanssen.
The culmination of that was several weeks later when the source actually came out and explained that in that package was the original trash bag that was used to wrap the material that Ramon Garcia provided to the Soviets. A couple of days later, the assistant director of the FBI lab came into my office with a smile on his face. That bag had sat in essentially KGB headquarters for nearly 20 years before it came out, and Hanssen's fingerprints were still on it.
Well, as soon as we confirmed that Hanssen was the mole, they wanted to catch him in the act of servicing a dead drop because that's just ironclad evidence. There was a sense of urgency because he faced mandatory retirement that year, and they wanted to wrap it up quickly while he was still an active employee of the FBI.
We needed to get Hanssen out of State Department to come back to FBI headquarters. So we came up with a strategy that we would offer him a promotion, an opportunity that he would now be in a position of great responsibility in the FBI. I had to put enough of a charade on it to convince him this was good for his career and that I truly needed him.
There were a number of people who were trying to pull together all the details who were going to prosecute the case in this room. which was pretty small. There was a knock on the door. And everybody just shut up, silent.
From our perspective, you never know where Hanssen's going to pop up in FBI headquarters and what he's going to ask about. We were very paranoid about him finding out any indication that the investigation had increased dramatically.
There was a knock on the door. And everybody just shut up, silent. It was Bob Hanssen. And he said, "Is Bob King here?" And I said, "Hey, Robert, I'll be tied up for a little bit, but I'll come up and see you in a few minutes." So I went up to his office, and first thing he said, "So we're getting ready to arrest the mole." And I said, "I wish." And then he got up to leave, and I said, "Well, I guess I'll go too." And I went back down and reported in and said, "Sorry, I can't remember a lot of what happened up there. It's pretty much a blur."
Once he got to the new job, he didn't have near the access he had on the automated case system he did at State Department. So he no longer enjoyed the ability to peruse and surf the FBI files. So I think Bob began to say, wait a minute, I'm getting promoted to the senior executive service, but I'd have less access than I used to have. Something's funny about this job. And in his final letter to the Russians, he complained about having a do-nothing senior job. And then he talked about he found a beacon transmitter noise interference on his AM/FM radio. He says, "I think I've aroused the sleeping tiger." So now we look at this document and say, he must have thought it was coming. But he still went ahead with this drop in February, and that resulted in the arrest.
There's a lot of emotions. Elation, not only the fact that the arrest is made, and it's made successfully without anybody being hurt, and then reality that it's not a proud day in the FBI to know that we had a spy amongst our midst for all these years.
February 18th, 2001, we heard a knock at the door. It was the SAC, Kathleen McChesney, and she said to me, "Bob Hanssen has been arrested." And I said, I guess this must go back to what I told the Bureau all those years ago. And they looked at me like I had two heads.
At that time, I was a senior liaison to the CIA. I'm Jim Lyle. I was an FBI agent from 1980 until my retirement in 2002, working criminal and counterintelligence matters. First thing Monday morning, Langley, phone rings, early, 7:30, WFO, we need to interview you. Mark Walk was contacted by the leadership of the Chicago division, and he said that he had reported concerns to you a number of years ago about Hanssen. So I'm thinking, whoa, I'm racking my brain trying to think what that might have been. It's still a bit vague on the exact words, but all I recall was that Bonnie Hanssen had found some money in a drawer of Bob's and didn't know where it came from. But it was something to that effect, because I remember sort of my reaction, which was, I don't know, Mark, maybe she ought to just talk to Bob. She's got some questions, or you could talk to her. But apparently there's reports that he said he was concerned about this in light of the mole hunt. But I had no context of mole hunts and source compromises and
those types of things going on back in Washington. It was unknown to me. To assert that we discussed the fact that Hanssen might be committing espionage or that I might refer it for some investigation, no, I never had any conversations like that. I think I'd remember that because that would have been very significant. There wasn't anything to launch an investigation of, in my view. But I was always pretty much cast in the general public view that this was another instance, of the Bureau's management being incompetent. The DOJ-IG report discussed all of this, and their conclusion stated, we accept Walk's version. That's what the DOJ-IG said. You don't think that is something that gives me some kind of heart palpitations? Even to this day, it does. They accepted his version of this and not mine. That still sticks with me very sharply.
Yes, sadly, I think that probably the only thing that Lyle and I agree with about that conversation is that it occurred and that we talked about the money, the $5,000 in the sock drawer. But I think that's about it. And it's unfortunate.
The impact of the loss of the information that Hanssen gave the Soviets touched across the entire U.S. intelligence community. It was devastating. In my view, the single biggest thing that he gave away that hurt our country was the continuity of government program, which provides the methods by which we survive a nuclear strike on Washington, D.C.
If possible nuclear war is going to take place, or chemical war, all the leadership of the government and the operations are relocated to off-site locations. And that could be in a Piggly Wiggly warehouse in Des Moines, Iowa. They set up, and all of a sudden, it's the headquarters, so they can communicate and they can still operate. So this was a highly compartmented, highly secret program that Bob Hanssen knew about.
Hanssen was so prolific and gave away so much information to the Russians that his tasking was not necessarily always specific. They just said, bring us everything you can get.
6,000 pages of documents. Let's not even talk about the classification level. Stack them up. That's a lot,
This morning, former FBI Special Agent Robert Philip Hanssen publicly admitted that he engaged in a 15-year-long conspiracy to commit espionage against the United States. Hanssen betrayed the trust of his country on the highest level imaginable.
I've never seen an investigation go from identification to arrest and prosecution in 3 months. That was an amazing accomplishment.
I will devote whatever resources are necessary within the department to ensure that justice is done in this case and any other case like it.
John Ashcroft, who was the Attorney General at the time, would love to have gone for capital punishment, but the FBI was playing a longer game, so was the Justice Department. They didn't want to go to trial because they didn't want to expose all of those sources, all of those methods, all of those gadgets, all of those little things that would immeasurably help hostile services.
I apologize for my behavior. I'm shamed by it. Now, beyond its illegality, I've torn the trust of so many. Even worse, I've opened the door for calumny against my totally innocent wife and hurt our children deeply. Hurt so many deeply otherwise as well.
Express any remorse at all at this point?
Yes, he very much wanted to make amends. That's a big reason for this disposition today. And he wanted to tell his former agency what he had done and how he had done it. That's matters of interest to them. They are going to learn things they did not know.
They wanted to debrief Robert Hanssen. They wanted to know what he accessed. And suddenly he clammed up and he forgot stuff. And did he really forget stuff, or was he playing them?
If he played dumb during the debriefing, either he has amnesia or he doesn't want to admit it. So what's he do? He minimizes it.
Well, they took the position, as long as we think that you're playing us, you're gonna do hard time in Supermax. How do you like that? And he liked it okay. He was supposed to go to a minimum security near his family. That was the deal, and they say you broke it.
When he came in to be arraigned, he looked out at all of the FBI agents who had lined up in the court to see him. He smiled. In the end, he outfoxed them.
Robert Hanssen's a traitor. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole at the Supermax prison out in Florence, Colorado. He spends 23 hours a day in his cell. He has no contact with any other prisoners. He has no contact with any outside life. I believe his family gets to visit him once or twice a year.
I'd like to think of his life as being, in a sense, kind of cloistered. He can pray all that he wants, and he can reflect on the things that he's done in his life. I wonder whether he has truly repented his sins. It's none of my business, but I still wonder.
The idea of life imprisonment, especially in solitary, it has to be just about the most extreme punishment that we can imagine. The idea of cold-bloodedly betraying your own country and everyone living in it is equally difficult to imagine. I'll just leave it at that.
I have to believe that the punishment fits the crime. And had he been executed, I would have considered that just. I'd be very upset if they released him. I think to his dying day, he will betray people.
I like to think that if I knew for a fact what he was doing, I'd have turned him in. On the other hand, the thought of turning him in is a terrible one for me.
In the years since Bob was arrested, and now coming on almost 20, I have come to think of him as a troubled and a poor soul. He had a lot of negative influences in his life, starting right from the relationship he had with his dad, which was anything but happy and fulfilling. I don't think he ever shed the hurt that those early experiences and subsequent life experiences dealt him. He tried to overcome them by becoming a police officer and then an FBI agent, and then a really good spy.